So if we go to the meeting now, just to make sure everybody's aware, this is being filmed and available on YouTube,
That's
live,
but not after the meeting, but not after the meeting.
and also be uploaded after the meeting. So if you haven't wanted to make up yet, perhaps you may need to make a swift exit and re-entry. So apologies for absence.
Councillors Morris, Windows and Will.
Do we have any others?
So will be late. Is it Freudisbury?
Okay, and emergency evacuation procedures. We're not expecting a fire alarm. The exits are marked. If we do have an alarm, I'm going to suggest that we follow the uniformed officers to my right. Yes, to my right, in terms of what we should do and where we should go. Is that fair?
Yes, members, if the alarm does go off, we've had a test today, so it will be for real if it does go off. As the chair has said, the exits are straight in front of me here and behind me. The stairway through that exit is on the right hand side. They all generally lead down to the reception area and then congregate out on the front car park to the right of the building.
So declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? I have two noted to me already, but any others?
Chair, as a matter of record, the principal officers and sector officers have an interest in 7.1 and should leave at that point of the meeting, otherwise we'll stay because I'm principal advisor on these matters.
Okay. Okay. So we'll go on to the chair's business. Now, a couple of items. One is that myself and the chief went to the fire conference at Gateshead a couple of weeks ago. It's very interesting stuff, but two things which I think are going to impact on us as an authority moving forward. One is the ongoing inquiry by Dame Judith Hackett into building regulations throughout the Grenfell tragedy, and I think there's going to be a fundamental re-regulation of that whole process of building and development, and I think that will surely impact on us as a fire service, as it will on local authorities. The other thing, we had a briefing from Home Office about changes to the funding pattern for fire, in that they are now going to start to review both risk and demand. Now, quite what that means, we do not know yet. We had about a half an hour briefing from Home Office about how they're looking to realign support they give us as fire authorities. So again, I've got no particular details, just be alert to anything that's coming to your various news streams on that. The second thing that went on, myself and Councillor Jackson, as the Vice Chair of the authority, met with the four leads of the unitary authorities this morning to discuss the numbers. I know we debated that last meeting, and we have out of consultation currently in terms of numbers. We had, I would say, a full and frank discussion. There was never any attempt to come to a consensus. It was to listen to what they had to say. There seemed to be a bit of a split. The three of the authorities seem to think they want about 11, plus some independent members, not like me, but independents as in non-councillors, to come along in some undefined way. And to then review the numbers in due course, and they may go up. And the other person was the deputy mayor from Bristol, who said that the preferred option from her authority was for 20 members. I'm going to suggest as follows. The first issue we really have is that my guidance from Home Office and from the Fire Minister, as per the briefing note I sent out to members earlier this week, is that any decision on numbers is a fire authority decision. It's not for the leaders to decide on a number and just tell us. Legally, it's down to us as a fire authority and our combination of it. I'm going to suggest that we have the consultation on numbers finishes on the 26th of March, which is on Monday, that we call, as soon as is practicable afterwards, a meeting of the General Purposes Committee to both consider the consultation responses and to look at starting to use a paper for the authority on the numbers informed by the consultation, and produce options, and we may or may not have to have an extraordinary meeting of this authority to discuss that. That's my strategy. In terms of what we're going to look at, I think we need to look at 5 things. One is the simple mathematics. Some numbers work well, some don't. We need to make sure we have an authority which is fit to fulfil its legal purpose of keeping the people of Avon safe. We need to make sure we have an authority which is so set up that we have people, as we've already discussed, who are skilled and able to contribute to the authority moving forward. So the idea of our role description and holding people to account. I think it needs to be representative in terms of the numbers of councillors throughout the whole of the Avon area, which is probably the most problematic. And the knock-on from that is, we as an authority and as a service are working extremely hard to make sure that the team keeping us safe, the operational and support teams, reflect the population of Avon, age, gender, ethnic mix, the whole lot. So what I really don't want to have is an outcome where we have a lot of even older men than me who are white, retired, forming opinions on taking the service forward. We need to be representative as an authority of the people that we serve. So those are the 5 key points. I'll be looking for any response in terms of numbers and change the combination order to look to achieve. I'll happily listen, as I'm sure we'll discuss on way we move this forward. But those are the 5 guidelines I would like to start with. So I'll ask Guy to formulate a meeting as quickly as we can practically.
It's already in the diary for May.
Oh, we need to have it earlier than that, I think. Okay. So it will be sometime in April. I appreciate the Easter holidays coming up, so to do it straight away is somewhat difficult. I would ask, Chris Jackson was there with me not only to be the Vice Chair and represent the authority, but also to make sure that what I've said to you today is correct, and to make sure that, that there's any other points you'd like to raise.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It was quite funny because we've been accused about whatever we have in pre-meetings, yet me and Don was kept waiting for 10 minutes while the 3 of the 4 leaders had a pre-meeting. So anyway, there was no, like I say, there was no discussion on them. They put forward their ideas for us to come back to bring back to this authority. They made it clear, 3 of the 4 leaders, that they would not consider anything more than 11, and they were going to sit. They told us that they will, as a group, be going to see the Fire Minister, which we've no input into. So we said, if you want to go and see the Fire Minister, we think it's a good idea, and come back, report back to us, and we'll report back to this meeting. But is it what time Monday is the consultation finished?
It's 5 p.m.
That was it. So we can't do anything really until that happens. So I just agreed with what Don said, that we get a general purposes committee meeting and then bring it back to this full authority to make the decision, because it's us that has to make the decision.
Thank you, Chris. Neil.
So could I just ask, I'm surprised at the figure of 11. Is that supposed to be the PCC, or how is that from that?
That the PCC would then be an addition to that, as and when she decides to join. I do make the point she's free to come as of now, but doesn't.
So where is the 11th number? Well, what's the rationale for that in their mind?
They wouldn't tell us. We did ask. We asked on 2 or 3. The other thing we got was, because the minister said so in the report, which was not in the
So
report.
about half, is it?
So they couldn't give us any rationale as to why.
I'll give you all some homework. Go away and look at the numbers and look at the impact on the diversity of the fire authority. The smaller you get the numbers, the more it becomes essentially conservative, with 2 or 3 members from Bristol.
Yeah, I did ask if they considered when they made their decision that there would be no Greens, Liberal Democrats or Independents on the fire authority, and they said, what was it? They got to get more councillors at the elections was the answer we had. So.
Alan.
Yeah, on the basis that Chris went, and I think that was good. When, and I don't know what Chris's answer this would be, but when you go next to London, I think, I mean, I appreciate the chief goes with you, but the chief clearly tries to achieve standing outside of the political machinations. But would it be worthwhile Chris going with you, if Chris didn't object, so that when you come back and give a report, it's not your report unsubstantiated by anybody else?
I've got no problem. The only issue I would have, I've got no problem at all with that personally, as long as Home Office are happy for us to bring an extra person. I've got no, and I would argue the point we should bring an extra person. Bear in mind what I just told you.
Well, I don't know what Chris thinks.
Thank you very much for that. Making more work for me. I'm thinking it ain't a bad idea. I hadn't thought of that, to be honest.
Well, it
ain't a bad idea.
Yeah.
And if I'm free, I'll go.
It just backs up what you report that not everybody agrees with.
Okay. Tony.
I agree that I think we should go. Can I just ask, there's one point that it's not mentioned, and I think it's something that I'm concerned about. When we went out to consultation, we put the implementation date as May 2019. Was there any talk, because my understanding was when they first came back, they were talking about May 2018. I mean, my rationale behind that is 3 of the 4 constituent authorities have got elections in 2019. It seems a bit ludicrous if all of a sudden everything changes in 2019.
Okay. Yes, it's very difficult, isn't it? Because myself and the Chief went up to London in September, met the Minister, and that was the timetable we agreed. At the more recent meeting with the Minister, there was a bit of about the date. And when the Chief and I met with the Home Office representative of the Fire Conference, they were more keen to have it done by the end of the year. I mean, to some extent, it's within our gift, but of course the meeting today was very much this will be the case by May, and we will override the law to send people to make the numbers as we wish, because their opinion is the combination order is not valid, and they can just say what they want. This is what we're struggling with, Tony, is that we've got people who think they know what they're talking about and won't ever be told differently, and then just working it very cavalierly away. I don't know how they work in their own councils. It's very hard for me to say, apart from one example. And I think it's something in the press about my opinion on North Somerset today. So, shall we call it a day? I think in terms of discussion, what I would like to do, Guy, is when we have the General Purpose Committee meeting, which I'd like to have as early in April as we can, is we put an invitation out to any members who want to come along. I think it would be useful to do that. I mean, we're not particularly going to be voting on any sort of committee lines. We want to get as broad an opinion as possible, because there's a wider range of members from all different authorities. So I'd be really keen to get as many can come as they like to.
So we avoid half term with that.
Well, I think we're going to have to go up until Europe. Yeah, and I think probably after the schools go back on the 8th, 9th, 10th? 10th. So ideally the week commencing the 10th, what we need to go for. That takes us, I think schools should all be back then. Okay, thank you. And so on to minutes of the Fire Authority meeting on the 9th of February. We did ask if any queries they could be passed to Guy beforehand.
Sorry, Chairman. I've got an issue with item 65. Please. The reason I couldn't come back before was I only got the answer this morning.
Is simply putting in what Councillor Barrett wanted.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's based on that I only had the answer this morning, which I would like to bring to your attention, please.
Well, we're doing matters arising as such, but you happy that says what we said in February, Colin?
I would rather you took it now, Chairman, if I may.
Well, I can't be master rising. We're talking about the accuracy of the minutes, aren't we?
No, I'm talking about the advice that I was given.
Okay, well, just perhaps explain a little bit more.
Right. I contacted the authority concerned, and I had the advice back this morning that the information I want, I must get from this authority. So I'm going
This authority?
Yes.
Well, as I'm not sure what you asked for, it's not easy.
I asked for some information under the Freedom of Information Act.
Councillor Barrett will have to write it.
Okay, can you write to Guy? I'll happily append these to the minutes if it's relevant, but I think we can't have matters arising. Can you write to Guy specifically on what you need?
I would like it minuted, Chairman.
Yes.
My request.
Yeah?
Okay.
So I haven't got the question, we can add that to the minutes for
No, because I only had the answer before I left home this morning.
Are members happy for that to be added to the minutes of today's meeting? The question that Councillor Barrett wishes to ask? Okay, so you supply it to Guy, we'll put it to today's minutes then, Colin. Is that right with you?
That's fine,
Okay.
thank you.
Everything else all right? Bob?
No, so
Okay.
I'm only going to say that the key point is this information arrived this morning, and therefore on the 1st of December what was stated was
That's correct.
the position then.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll go on to public access. Do we have any?
So, do I have that right, Chairman?
Yes, we do. So we'll go on to the of committees. So we have to ask several members of staff to use knowledge and expertise. Alan, this is your committee. You happy to move this?
Yeah. The recommendation sits on page 026. Unless it's printed elsewhere. Sorry?
It's 3 in the hard copy. It's on the face of the agenda.
Oh. Sorry, yeah. I went for the minute. So, fellow members, you have before you the resolution. It was something we had to look at with the job advert going out for the new chief fire officer. The previous annual salaries had, in the view of the committee that was discussing it, got to a point where it was way beyond the average and way beyond what we thought it should be. So this offers the opportunity of bringing it back into more reasonable realms, and that's why you can see at A, we have gone for the chief fire officer's salary to be set at 137,623, and that's the average basic pay of a chief fire officer across the UK, as set out, as it says there, 2017 pay survey from the LGA. The existing post holders below chief fire officers will continue to be paid at their current salaries. Clearly there is an issue of the percentage factor, and so clearly we can't depress incomes, so we decided that they would continue to be paid at their current salaries, and as C says, any new appointments, the differential will be restored in relation to the chief fire officer's pay, and D sets out the fact that the annual pay award from the NJC will be paid in accordance with the goals book. And part 2, we approve the proposed pay policy statement subject to any changes resulting from the Fire Authority decision on minute 13.
Minute 14 as well?
That's it.
Okay. So, all those in favour? Any against? Thank you, Karen.
Can I just
Also,
ask something, I hope it's not a silly question, but in terms of that committee, is it all of us and whoever can go? Because I wasn't clear that I was ever on that committee.
No,
I wasn't quite sure how it was made up.
It's the employment committee, our standing employment committee of the Fire Authority. We're all on.
We're all on it.
No, we're all on a variety of different committees.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm on that, but it says that I've given apologies. I think it was because we needed more people to make up the numbers.
Oh, could have been then.
Because it says it says that someone was substituted for me, but I'm not on that committee. Am I? I'm not aware of it.
Okay, well, sorry about that.
Well, that was enough for you, your group leader.
I went instead.
Okay.
Sorry. And while Guy is bringing the officers back in, can I should have done this earlier, can I thank Mary for the wonderful job in producing the minutes. They're very clear and concise, I thought. Covered an awful lot of ground, so thank you very much for coming and helping me. I won't embarrass you too much, but it's worth praising. Thank you. Okay. So 7.2, Tony Davis, you happy to leave the performance review and scrutiny? Just for those. Okay, we happy to note those? Okay, thank you. And we go on to item 8. Two items, these are more for those again. Under 8.1, the clerk, after consultation with the chair, arranged inaccurate comments concerning a member of staff who muted with the published recording of Fire Authority meeting on the 9th of February. And to note that the clerk, after consultation with the chair and group leaders, arranged the following vacancies to be filled. Ordnance, Governance and Ethics Committee, Councillor Morris, who's sadly not here today because she's unwell, and the Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Ashley. Thank you, John, for offering to sit on that committee. And we now move to item 9, which is the Integrated Risk Management Plan, and it is Pete Davis to present. We are reviewing this, as you know, we're doing various work in terms of how we're going to do it, so I thought we'd have to get an officer who knows what he's talking about to tell us, rather than us lumping amongst ourselves. I'll do it with members rather than the officer.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair, members. My name is Pete Davis. I work for the Internal Improvement Team, and I've been asked by the Chief to give you a brief presentation on the process which lies ahead for us in the revision of our Integrated Risk Management Plan. For those members who were present for the members' training session before the authorities meeting in December, some of these slides will look familiar, but we felt it was important that all members on the full authority had a clear understanding of the process which lies ahead of us in order to produce our new Integrated Risk Management Plan, or IRMP, by the 1st of April next year. So I thought it might just be worth quickly reminding ourselves about our statutory duties, particularly under the Fire and Rescue Services Act. So that talks about our statutory duties of fire safety, firefighting, responding to road traffic accidents, and the Act still does call them road traffic accidents as opposed to collisions. And under Section 9, any other emergencies as defined by order by the Secretary of State. And so far, since the primary legislation came into being in 2004, we've only had one Section 9 order, and that relates to response to CBRN emergencies, that's chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear emergencies, and rescue and protection in the case of certain specified emergencies, which basically brings onto a statutory footing the capabilities which were provided to us post 9/11 in what we used to call the New Dimension Scheme, now termed as National Resilience. In addition to those statutory duties, the Fire Authority also has Section 11 discretionary powers to use its staff and its resources for any other purpose that it deems reasonable. And it is under the Section 11 discretionary powers that we provide non-statutory rescue provision, such as animal rescue, mud rescue, water rescue. Interestingly, although under the New Dimension programme high volume pumping facilities were provided. The use of high volume pumps in flooding is not a statutory duty in the same way as other national resilience assets now are under that Section 9 order which I talked about. In addition, under Section 21 of the Fire and Rescue Services Act, the Secretary of State publishes a Fire and Rescue National Framework. The current one was published in 2012, and you'll be aware from the last meeting that we're just going through a process. The public consultation has closed, to which the authority responded, for a new national framework, which is expected to come into force in June. But it is the national framework which requires the authority to publish an integrated risk management plan. And that is quoted as a must do in the national framework. Looking at identifying and assessing fire and rescue related risks to the communities that we provide a fire and rescue service to. In addition to responsibilities for cross-border backup to our neighbouring services, multi-agency incidents and those of a national nature. So thinking about things like the National Fire and Rescue Service response to the Buncefield Oil Terminal fire, incidents that require a national response. So we've got to take all of that into consideration in our IRMP planning process. Like I mentioned, the current national framework is the 2012 edition, but we are expecting a new edition to be published in June of this year, and it reiterates the fact that fire authorities must have an IRMP and provides some additional must-dos in terms of producing the document, its content and how it is produced. And I think it will probably be the case that the forthcoming new inspection regime by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services will start to standardise the way in which fire authorities across England produce their IRMPs and the process that they go through to do so. So our current IRMP, that one there, was developed during 2015-16 with an entirely refreshed area risk assessment which looked at fire and rescue related risks from both our own local area, so that includes things like the 4 constituent unitary authorities' plans for increased housing. It included specific high-risk industrial sites, our local transport network, so on and so forth, as well as introducing our kind of take on the national strategic risks. So we naturally share a proportion of the risk from things like the risk to the UK from terrorist attack, the things like the flooding, climate change risks as well. But they're not specific to Avon, they are simply us taking a portion of the defined national risk. Putting those two elements together, we get our local composite risk profile, and it is that that was reflected in the 16 to 20 IRMP, which is current. It was developed at the time on 2 fundamental planning assumptions, which I'll come back to in just a moment. And that was at the time the authority's decision not to make any changes to our response standards. So the speed at which we will respond to emergencies in our communities, and additionally the corporate decision to align to the Fire Brigade Union's critical attendance standards, the CAR standards, which dictate the weight of attack, the numbers of firefighters that we will send to specific incidents and specific emergencies. So those are really 2 fundamental issues, which I'll come back to in a minute, but which will, if they are changed, and it is an if, that will affect the way in which we provide our services in the lifespan of the next IRMP. One of the requirements of the national framework is for public consultation, and this particular edition of our IRMP went through public consultation in November and December 2016, and you'll recall that it was approved for publication by the full authority at its meeting in February 2017. The statutory inspection report did make a comment on our IRMP, but in the Fire Minister's covering letter to the statutory inspection report, he required a review of the integrated risk management plan as an integral part of our improvement journey, which we are currently on. As a result of that, we plan that our current IRMP, which was originally due to take us up to end of March 2020, will expire a year early. And I'll explain with the assistance of this timeline how that's going to work. We've got our current corporate plan, which was between 2015 and 2018, so that is just about to expire come the end of this month. The Integrated Risk Management Plan, as I said, was due to go up to the end of March 2019, but having had a look at our corporate planning process, the proposal is that we integrate our corporate plan and our integrated risk management plan into a new integrated service plan from April 2019 onwards. That then leaves us with an interim year, if you like, between the beginning of the 18-19 financial year up to the end of March 2019, where we'll have an interim corporate plan, which is essentially detailing the work that we will undertake to develop our proposals for the next IRMP, and which will then be published in the single integrated plan on the 1st of April 2019. So we're going to go from a separate corporate plan and a separate IRMP to a single integrated document and give us a fresh start from the 1st of April 2019. I'm afraid this is going to be too small for you to see on the screen, but it details the timeline for the development of the integrated risk management plan for publication on the 1st of April 19. And of course that includes developing proposals based on modelling, it includes the public consultation process, it includes time taken to receive those comments from the public, to analyse them and to work any amendments required into the document prior to it coming to Fire Authority for final approval and publication on the 1st of April 2019. So when you work all of those stages into the process, it's clear that the timeline rapidly collapses on you. So it sounds like the 1st of April 2019 is a long time away, but of course in the process of developing the strategic plan, it's not far away at all. And that development of the new IRMP is one of the integral parts, as I've mentioned, to the improvement programme that we're currently on. And it kind of looks at that, the IRMP element is that top lane, top row in that diagram. And I just want to take you through a couple of the stages that we're going to be working on over the next few months in order to kickstart this process. The strategic assessment will look at those external factors which influence the work of the Fire and Rescue Service in Avon, so looking at local risks such as those high-risk industrial sites, housing development across the 4 constituent unitary authorities, and our local resilience forum community risk register. In addition to those national risks which we have to be cognizant of, so for example the top ones detailed in the National Security Strategy, which are relevant to us because we have to have a response capability in the event that some of those issues are realised. The National Risk Register, some of the issues around strategic policing requirement have a direct impact on our response capability, so for example civil contingencies and major incidents. The issues surrounding climate change, the issues around terrorism. So that strategic assessment, the external factors which influence the way that we will progress over the next period of the IRMP will be refreshed in the new document and over the coming few months. In addition, we'll be doing a risk risk review, which is the internal factors to Avon Fire and Rescue Service. So looking at where our risk lies, we commissioned already a baseline report to look at where our risk is, looking at historical incident data, where our current stations and resources are, what our current response standards are, and what does risk look like based on those, what our predetermined attendance levels are for various incidents, where our high-risk dwellings and buildings are, and factors such as the indices of multiple deprivation, where our population is from the 2011 census stats. So that piece of work to provide a baseline report about our risk profile in Avon from an internal kind of point of view has already been commissioned and will be reporting in the next few weeks. Once we've got that strategic assessment and the risk profile, we kind of come back to the confirmation of the planning assumptions, which you'll recall I mentioned were decided that they wouldn't change in the current iteration of the IRMP. But they are absolutely the fundamental building blocks upon which we build our capability and our capacity. So the response standards, we will certainly have to have a discussion at authority level around what they will be in the future and if they change. Speed of response and weight of attack. What are we sending and how quickly do we expect it to be at the scene of an incident? And confirmation of whether or not we are going to continue to align to the critical attendance standards. So that's dictating the weight of attack as opposed to the speed of response. But they are absolutely critical, fundamental decisions which we need to be confirmed or otherwise in advance of developing proposals for the next round of IRMP planning. And then those planning assumptions can then feed into various scenario planning to see what effect any changes in those assumptions, any changes in our estates, our vehicles and our people will make to the efficiency of our response to emergencies in the community. So that's kind of the process which will then lead into answering 6 questions of risk in our integrated risk management plan. So who, what, when, where, how and why is someone in our community at risk, and looking at how they will affect our delivery of services against preventing, protecting, responding and resilience. So that will all come together in the new integrated risk management plan from 2019 onwards. The framework simply says that it must cover a period of at least 3 years and then be rolling thereafter, so we're continually refreshing it, but it's got to have a lifespan of at least 3 years, but it may be that you decide it can be out to 4 or 5 years potentially. The framework only states that it's got to be a minimum of a 3-year period. So I hope that kind of just gives you a brief flavour of the journey that we're going to be going through in respect of the integrated risk management planning process over the next few months. It is a rapidly decreasing timescale. We've got a new dedicated team starting on this process already, and it will be a busy period for us where we will have to come back to the authority to kickstart that discussion about the fundamental planning assumptions that I've detailed. So I hope that's useful.
That's really helpful, thank you very much. Are there any comments, questions, Mark?
2 quick questions. The first bit, under the Service Act 2004, does it make any difference to whether we get money from central government as to whether it comes under Section 9 or Section 11? I'm talking specifically about water rescue and high volume pumps.
So we get National Resilience Grant funding for the high volume pumping, but there's no direct funding for discretionary activities that you choose to use your staff and resources to respond to.
But if it came under Section 9, would we get money?
Yes, Section 9 would be funded.
We would be funded. So is there some political element that we should be pushing national government to change, for example, water rescue, and put it into section 9?
Well, there has been a long-standing campaign to push for a statutory responsibility to flood rescue, which has been enacted in the devolved administrations, but not yet in England. And as I understand it, there seems to be a continued view for England that there won't be a statutory duty for flood rescue. But of course, I suppose that could change at any time, but that's my current understanding.
I'm thinking more about rescuing students who've fallen into the river in Avon at Christmas, actually, because it's a serious issue in Bath. And I think in Bristol too, there's an issue with people falling into the river drunk after parties. The second question was looking for a metric to justify response times as part of the IRP, because it is absolutely, as you say, the critical piece of everything that we do is based around that. But I don't see a metric that delivers that 8 minutes or whatever the other minutes are, and whether we should be doing, we should be doing work on that to justify it.
Yeah, I mean, we're currently doing a survey of what other response standards around fire authorities around the country look like, and exploring the evidence base which lies behind them, so that we can bring something back from that. But that work is just starting now.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Bob Garner.
Yes, thank you. Could you repeat, please, the list of who, what, why, where and how? You were faster than I could write.
I think you've got them all there, didn't you? The six.
Only 5, I think, Bob.
Sorry?
Only 5, wasn't it?
Okay. I stand corrected.
Six questions of risk. Yep. So sorry, I didn't hear the ones that you got.
Who, what, why, how and when?
Where? Yeah, that's the missing one. Sorry, I went too quickly.
Thank you.
That's very good, Bob. I think you'll get a top mark on the Ofsted for that. In 5 out of 6 right. Neil.
Is enough? Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, many of us are facing new proposals for new housing developments around our areas, obviously. And more and more, there seem to be cases where you get some pretty large cul-de-sacs in effect. And there's a proposed development for 450 houses just close to where I live. May or may not be in emergency access, but all of that lot would be coming out onto one not very wide lane. And I'm just wondering to what degree, if any, the fire service gets to comment on any of these, or do you rely on agreed parameters that are laid down to access these estates?
Yeah, we do get consulted on planning arrangements, particularly around increased housing, and there's around access, road width, and also around water supplies, so distance to the nearest hydrant, and those sort of things for firefighting purposes and for access for emergency services. So we get consulted regularly on new housing developments, and that goes through our fire prevention department and teams.
So is there a minimum cut-off where this happens? I mean, how do we know when you should be consulted or not?
I don't know what the minimum number of houses is. I haven't got the answer to that for you. But where there's a significant development, particularly where there's new road infrastructure, and particularly around road infrastructure, that is important because it's on an existing road alongside other properties that would already have that infrastructure in place. So where there are new roads, that's when we get consulted on, and particularly where there's a large number of new development housing.
So you're very confident that that system...
Yes, absolutely. It's part of the planning arrangements as well.
Okay.
Chair, if I can add, approved document B gives the dimensions of road widths, turning circles, access for turntable ladders and specialisms. And like somebody said, the technical fire safety team, when they're consulted on, comes to that approved document B, which actually is up for review post-Grenfell.
Also, perhaps from a practical point of view, we are sat in what is called the biggest cul-de-sac in Europe, which is Portishead, so we've got lots of practice. Is there any other comments, questions on this piece? Thank you, Pete. This has been really interesting. I think this is probably the key piece of work I think we're doing as an authority moving forward, because we've got to get this right. As Neil quite rightly points out, the level of extra development for the joint spatial plan moving forward. We've got to get this right, and I'm really, really pleased with the approach we're taking to finish based and analysis. So thank you very much for the presentation. And we move on to assigning the apprenticeship levy.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Now, you do a presentation or you talk?
I'll just talk.
Okay.
Good afternoon, members. Just draw your attention to item 10 of the agenda, in particular a paper around apprenticeship levy. Many of you may already be aware through your local authorities around the requirement for organisations that have a salary bill of more than £3 million or more is to pay into an apprenticeship levy. And of course, as an authority, are not immune to that. With a salary expenditure of roughly around £30 million, then we pay into an apprenticeship levy, which is through a digital account service, and that equates to roughly around about £150,000 a year, so it's 0.5% of our salary costs. And we've been paying into that levy since April of 2017. And all organisations that pay into that they've got a number of choices, and the paper sets out 5 options for you to consider, with some recommendations with regards to options 3 and 4 and options 5 as well. But in essence, when we pay into the apprenticeship levy, it gets held into a digital account, and then as an organisation, as we establish apprenticeships, and apprenticeships were originally established around creating employment and reducing unemployment in our communities, then the expenditure is taken out of that account for training purposes, so it does not cover salary costs. It covers the cost of training and obviously qualifications. There are set bandings for those qualifications from level 3, which is kind of a supervisory level, right up to level 7, which is a strategic level or a degree, a master's degree educational standard. They are currently being developed across all of industry, not just the fire and rescue service, for particular levels of standards, and they are growing on a weekly and monthly basis and what we can access. Currently then the paper sets out 5 proposals or 5 options. Option 1 being that the levy can be continued to pay into the account and we don't use a levy, in which case after 24 months the levy just gets redistributed nationally effectively for use by other organisations, but we lose it out of our running account, our digital account, and that's on a rolling monthly basis over from 24 months onwards. So option 1 is to pay into the account and not utilise any of the levy for our own purposes for the development of either new entrants or own staff. Option 2 is around entering into an associate agreement with partner agencies, so that partner agencies have access to your digital account and also utilise your levy funding for their own apprenticeships. That is, from our organisation perspective, that is similar to option 1 in that we see no benefit from that with regards to our own employees and development of our own staff and new entrants. Option 3 is a levy to be used for new roles or existing roles within the organisation, both from a non-operational and an operational purpose. Option 4 is about using the levy for operational firefighters. That might be the door outside. I think that's the door outside. So my apologies, yes, option 4 is using a levy to fund the training of new recruits as firefighters, and there are a number of programmes that are being developed nationally around apprenticeship firefighter schemes. And option 5 at the moment is around using the levy to develop existing staff through either career development, progression development, or development in role. The paper itself asks members to approve initially option 5 as the preferred approach, because as it stands at the moment, option 5 really is an opportunity that we can exploit reasonably quickly, with a further option or recommendation that we continue to explore option 3 and 4 in the next 12 months, so during the year of 2019, as we start to learn around the different apprenticeship pathways and development packages that become available and are approved through the approved applier scheme, through approved provider scheme. What I can tell members is we've already started option 5 in that we have an apprenticeship already that we've employed through the finance department, and a young lady who is on an apprenticeship scheme through an approved apprenticeship scheme, so we're drawing down from that levy already. And we have plans this year for progressing option 5, where we have 2 cohorts of 10 existing staff that will go on to a level 3 apprenticeship as part of their career progression pathway. And we are continually exploring option 3 and 4. In particular, we will be recruiting fire control staff this year, and that we will be exploring opportunities to employ fire control staff or new entrants into the fire control through an apprenticeship pathway. But that depending on, of course, on the available and accredited scheme that is signed off through the approved providers.
Thank you for that. I think it's extremely important that we take advantage of the money we're putting into this, and given the issue particularly with our support staff and developing our ongoing firefighter cohort, I think we need to tap into this. So thank you for that, Simon. Question, Mark.
Really, the first thing is an observation, and I think option 1 and option 2, I agree with you, is terrible options, particularly because we effectively lose the money, so you shouldn't be doing it either of those. What I'm not completely, I don't completely understand the difference between option 3 and option 5. Option 3, I understand, is about pulling new people off the street and training them, and option 3 gives you the flexibility to train firefighters, which you already do. We haven't done it for a long time, but we're doing it now. So we've got courses, we know that we can put people on those courses and train them. And at the same time be able to train support staff or send them away for training. For example, you talked about an accountant's type person, or it could be a mechanic, or it could be an IT manager type person. So what I'm not quite sure about is option 3, which is taking new people off the street, giving them jobs, whereas option 5 is about those people we already employ, but training them to a higher standard. Is that correct?
Not quite, Councillor, no. Option 5 is around current employees that are on either a promotion. So as part of that promotion, so from, let's say they're moving to supervisory management, then as part of our people and development strategy and upskilling our staff in leadership and managerial qualifications, it's using the apprenticeship levy to give them a recognised pathway to achieve a nationally recognised standard at a supervisory level, so it would be level 3, for example, at that level. At that position.
That's kind of what I thought I'd say, but anyway, all right, you put it in more words than I did. So going back, why can't we do option 3 now? You said that we do 5 now, but we can't do 3 now. Why not?
Yeah, it's basically around the resourcing, around putting the infrastructure in place that we as an organisation can support that. Currently with option 3, if we're looking at firefighter roles and apprenticeships, part of, and there's one only just been signed off now as a national standard, part of that apprenticeship pathway is 12 months of that is learning around the rest of the organisation and they're non-operational, while they build up their operational knowledge and skills. And the second part of that apprenticeship pathway, which is a 2-year programme, is then they move into the operational environment where they go onto station and they learn on the job. Yeah. So it's just about putting that infrastructure in place at the moment. It takes some time for us to do that. But if we don't start to access our levy now after 24 months, if we're not in a position to facilitate option 3, which we're working towards, we start to lose that levy. So it's ensuring that we maximise that levy that we're paying into and don't lose it.
So this isn't an either or. So we do option 5 now, but in preparation for option 3 later. Is that right?
And there will be a joint approach.
Yeah.
Twin track approach.
So the recommendations are to approve option option 5, then approve options 3 and 4 for adoption in 2019, because we're currently preparing for that. One thing I didn't inform members is some good news around the apprenticeship levy. Is if we overspend our apprenticeship levy on an annual basis, central government will, as it currently stands at the moment, will top that levy up by a further 90%. So the additional cost, they will cover 90%, and as an organisation, we cover the further 10% of the cost of that training.
Yeah, so just to be clear, see at the moment if somebody came into one of the roles in option 3, there wouldn't be an apprenticeship, they would just be trained in that role. So the benefit of this is that they get nationally recognised qualifications, or
yes,
something that we don't do at the moment. We just train somebody to do that particular role.
We give them qualifications, but if it's not recognised through the apprenticeship pathway, we can't recover that cost through the apprenticeship levy. So what we're doing really is we are maximising the levy of existing training, but going through a recognised pathway from an approved provider on the digital service.
So this is a way of us recovering the costs that we would have spent training people.
Yes.
Okay. And obviously the other reason, we obviously need time to set up. It doesn't cover salary costs, does it? So
no,
it has to be used for training costs.
Yes.
So that's obviously the barrier to agree the finance that these are the roles that we're going to recruit to. And that's obviously, has that been done yet? To say we've got we're going to have these many roles available next year?
We will look to, well at the moment we're just planning out for next year's retirement plays and levers of the organisation. Of course we have to go through the RMP and align our resources to the risk as well, and that will give us a better understanding of what we need to recruit into next year. And it will be a blended approach of a two pathway, as I've just kind of sort of reiterate, sort of explain there around the first 12 months currently, the first 12 months of a firefighter apprenticeship, they're not operationally on the fire station, so they will be supernumerary to our current headcount.
And also with the money that we've built up so far, we'll just roll that over into next, because we don't want to lose that money, do we? So
it starts knocking off after 24 months, but it's a 24-month program, so we're already spending it anyway, so we're in a good position.
Chris Jackson. Yep, I'm all in favour of apprentices, as I used to be. That's myself. But I've got one concern with the operational side of it. I don't know if the rules have changed. At our last recruitment process, it was in the paperwork that you had to live within Avon and you couldn't move out. With apprentices, we've got no ties whatsoever, so we could train. We could put a recruitment process out, somebody could come in, so we could train that apprentice up to operational level, they could even go and join another service, and we got no input into it, no stay or whatsoever. Is that correct?
2 points there, Councillor. Yes, we've changed that policy regarding constantly residing in the service.
Forever and a day.
Yes, so we've changed that.
I wasn't aware of that. I wish somebody would have made me aware of it.
That was kind of an administration error. And the second part to your question is that will be the same in any employment in my assessment, in that if we employ someone, there's always a risk of training them up and then moving on elsewhere. We would like to hope that through obviously investment in our staff and our employment policies, that we'll be able to retain staff, and our focus would be to retain the staff that we employ.
Okay.
Who do you want to speak? Any other comments? Neil?
I was just thinking about a point that Chris has made. Presumably you would get a pretty large number of people applying for apprenticeships, would you? And you would be able to be fairly selective and wisdom on their commitment. So hopefully you could get a pretty reasonable idea of how committed they would be.
Yeah, and it will be apprenticeships is a good way of increasing our diversity also in regards to how we target potential recruits and employees. So it is a good opportunity for us to have a blended approach to how we select and recruit personnel.
Sounds good. I mean, would you have any feel for the kind of portion of places that you might offer vis-a-vis the number of
groups? That's within our gift to determine. Any other further comment, questions? Welcome, Afsal.
Thank you, and I do apologise for making such an entrance.
We knew you were coming late. You made a big thing of the door, I think. So welcome. And should we go to the vote recommendations on page 36? There are two recommendations. I'll do 10 seconds together. There are the options on page 38 and 39. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? No, thank you very much. And we go on to item 11, which is Treasury Management Capital Programme, which is Martin.
Thank you, Chair.
Can I just make a point, if I may? I've had the pleasure of being on this fire authority for 15 years. And because of the changes that are proposed, I have to cease being a member of this authority as from the 1st of May. In doing so, I'd like to give my credit, please, and appreciation to the officers, all in the way they've run this authority. And therefore I wish them the very best of luck in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you. Much appreciated. Are you leaving now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those kind words.
Yes, I guess we're going to make it a pleasure.
Okay. Okay, Martin.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to start off with, I was going to say a little test for members to see if they spotted the mistakes in the report, but rather than embarrass members to see if they have read the report, I will give you the answers. On page 42 in the summary section, the second paragraph, reference to paragraph 9.2 should in fact be 3.28. And in the last paragraph, paragraph 4, the reference to paragraph 6.2 should in fact be 3.19. Apologies for any confusion that may have caused members. The primary purpose of this report is to enable members to agree the treasury management strategy and plan for the period 18-19 through to 2021-22. Additionally, it sets out a capital programme which has been revised for the estimated slippage being carried forward from the current year 17-18, and it also sets out the percentage indicators which allow members to decide whether the capital programme that is being proposed is affordable or not. At this stage, I think it's important to point out that the treasury management strategy and potential indicators that are before you are based on my understanding a few weeks ago of what the likely outcome the Stellar HQ site was going to be. However, in light of the current position and the ongoing negotiations with the preferred bidder and the decisions that are likely to be made later on in this meeting with regards to the HQ site, then obviously the treasury management strategy and presented indicators may well need to be changed, and it's proposed that those changes will be brought to the June committee for members to approve.
I also agree that this has a fundamental effect. Item 15 has a fundamental effect on this. Therefore, I was wondering whether these two pieces could be taken together at 15 so we can discuss it openly rather than having to push them around into the moment.
I think the reality is that I think until the authorities made the decision in 15, Martin will need to take away that decision and reflect upon potential impact. So the advice I would offer members is to, if you're satisfied, to approve what you have before you today, but clearly in the provisos that Martin has given, that in light of the decisions we'll make later, he may have to bring back an additional report for your consideration at the June meeting. You are required to have a treasury management policy.
Yeah, strategy for the forthcoming year. So I think I think members need to approve the current treasury management strategy that's set out, but on the proviso that it may have to be changed and revised version of that will be brought to the June committee. I appreciate that that's not satisfactory, but unfortunately these are living documents and they do change periodically, obviously, as we go through. But
I don't want to be difficult. What I'm saying is I don't want to vote on it or discuss it in detail until we deal with item 15 because of the effect. And I prefer if we could bring the voting on the recommendations to that item on item 15 when we discuss item 15. Because then we'll be much clearer and understand the situation and the risks involved.
Martin will not have, Martin has not heard this report on the basis of any of the option instead of HQ, so Martin will not be in a position to provide professional advice today on treasury management in the last decision of 15. I think that's the reality of it.
I completely understand where you're coming from, Mark, and that was one of the reservations I've written on my own papers. But we do need to have a Treasury Management Capital Programme agreed in public session. May I suggest from my own viewpoint, and I do read as others to contest, that if we decide anything now on the basis of what we know now, we then may have to revisit decisions, as we always should do, based on further information that comes forward post now. So if we try to imagine where we are now and forget about what's going to come later, and I'm quite happy to minute, though I may not be, our mutual concerns about the fact we may have to revisit this whole document in the very near future.
I don't see how we can do that. I just don't see how we can vote on something when we know there's a change to the way that the structure of the paper is written, and what we don't know are the risks involved, say, on the current plan as written.
Chair, just a point of order. Should we be having this discussion in open session? We might have to make a decision on the plan in open session, but if we're going to have a somewhat odd discussion, which isn't mentioning things that we know we're going to mention, then I think it ought to be done in closed session.
Chris and Kai both indicate, I'll make a suggestion in a minute, but Chris,
For future, before we go on to the paper, if there is a paper we've got to take in closed session that affects something on the agenda, why don't we just do it right at the beginning of the meeting, have the closed session before, so we've got made that decision, and if it impacts on something on the agenda later, then we know what the thing is. So that's the first bit. The second bit, is it possible for us, because I'm happy to vote this through, and then is it possible for us to vote this through, and when we get to the exemption, add an addendum when we make the decision to reflect or look, or is that a better way round?
The better approach is to defer this item till after you discussed item 15.
Yeah, so just to be clear, so the figures in this report, are they based on the original offer from the preferred bidder, or the offer that we're looking at in 15?
They're halfway house because the position was somewhat different a week ago than it is now.
Okay, well, so it is based on an offer that doesn't exist anymore.
Chair, I would make the point again, we are in open...
Well, I'm not mentioning anything.
No, I appreciate that, but...
Can I suggest then...
So it's probably not valid to vote on this anyway.
Well, can I suggest
information that's not relevant?
We defer item 11 to the end of the meeting. We now move to item 13, exclude the press and public.